Alright everyone, even you Shane. We're back this week. We're actually going to use the Springpole Lathe I put together. It's kind of similar to using the lathe like we do in class. There's a few differences. For one thing, this is a piece of apple wood that I started to peel the bark off of. I cut down a couple apple trees in my yard. They were dying off anyway, so I cut those down. Ideally with a Springpole lathe, foot-powered lathe like this, you want to use green lumber, something that's still wet. It's pretty heavy. There's a lot of moisture in it. My hand's actually pretty wet from handling it right now. You could use dried lumber. It'd just be way more trouble than it's worth. So I do have some green hardwood here. Now, the one thing to see, I've peeled this. I just have a little bit of bark down this end. I'm going to take care of that with my hewing hatchet. Not much of a bevel on this side. It's pretty flat, and the bevel's on this side. So it's a right-handed hewing axe because that flat side is on the left. I can actually get very close and just shave this and hew it roughly round. Okay. If you had me in class this year, you might remember while we were making spoons, I actually made a couple handles and stuff in the shop. So this is one of them. It's a piece of ash. Very good handle material. It's a hardwood. Great resiliency for handles. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to quickly make sure my right leg's out of the path of the axe back here. And I'm chopping into another piece of wood because I don't want my good hewing hatchet to be hitting the ground. So you can see that right there, I have that pretty much peeled, and what I'm going to do real quick, I have one of my Springpole chisels here, the lathe chisels that I made. It's fairly sharp, and all I'm going to do is I'm trying to just get this as perfectly round as I can, because I don't want it to have any surfaces for it to hang that leather belt that's actually going to be what turns this on. So I'm just going to try to trim it as close to round as I think I can. It doesn't have to be perfect. I just like to get it a little closer than what I have here, and then the lathe will pretty much take care of everything else on the lathe. Alright, let's see how we did. So first things first, you can see that I actually put that poppet, the tailstock, whatever you want to call it, in. Now it's secured in here by a wedge just like everything else, but I have a pin in it so that it actually, when I'm going to loosen this, it can't pop out on me, so I don't have to scramble, look around for it while I'm working. Now all I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of estimate where center is on this. It's pretty close. I'm going to slide that. That's fairly close as well, and what I like to do, I'm knocking the pins in the center in there, and you can see sometimes it actually doesn't hold it. So I have those marked on there pretty well. We'll pop that in. Now, okay, not too bad there. So it's secured in there. I'm just spinning it by hand really fast. That actually looks like it's spinning fairly true. So, I'm going to knock that out because I still have to wind my cord around this. Now you have to be careful how you do this, because if you put this in the wrong way, what can happen is it can spin the wrong way. Now right here I do have it spinning the correct way, but just so you see what I'm talking about, when I press down, I want to have this spinning towards me. And you can see right now, when I press, it's spinning away from me. So it's kind of like if we were to put the scroll saw blade in upside down. It's not going to work. So I have that mounted correctly. Slide that in. And again, Couple taps on that side. It's locked in fairly well. Now, one thing I do have to do, I do want to adjust it over here to make sure that I'm out of the way, because one of the big worries when you're working with a Springpole lathe like this is that if you get too close to your cord here, you can cut it. The other thing is, you can see it doesn't move very fast when it returns. So what I need to do, I actually need to adjust where my spring tensioner is. That's a little bit better. We'll actually go a little bit farther to the end. Now, I'm pretty much ready to actually try this out. So I'm going to pick one of my skew chisels that I made. I want to have a high angle of attack on here. You can hear right there, I'm not hitting the whole way around. You can also hear that I'm barely pulling off on the return. When I let go of that spring down here, I pull back just a little bit so that it's not always riding. I want a little bit more spring tension. And we're going to try a gouge real quick that I sharpened up. If you've had me in class, we've obviously gone over using the lathe. You'll know that the gouge, that curved chisel, a lot of times we just take to the grinder, polish the burr on the inside. This one I've actually taken from the grinder and actually sharpened the diamond stones that we usually use in the hand plane blades in the shop. We'll see how this works. And it's sharpened up so that it's actually doing a pretty good job. Another big worry you have to watch out for with the powered lathe, we always have to be careful about loose clothes, jewelry that hangs down, which that's something you have to watch out for on this. One of the big things is watching out for the spring pole. I could have made that a little bit taller when I built this if I had wanted to, but really, you shouldn't have your head right over that anyways. Now, you can see right there, I have this almost round. And with pretty little effort, I've actually taken off quite a bit. From the largest diameter of this, it's obviously not round, I've taken off close to a 1/4 inch on my right side. So we're going to try out that big wide chisel I showed you last week that I had made. What I made this one for is actually specifically for flattening wide areas. There's a few articles I had. They kind of describe some different types of spring pole chisels, and a fairly wide flat chisel is one of them for flattening material. We don't use this on the we usually don't use a chisel like this on the power lathe, but this makes quick work of some wider areas I've found. And it's fairly simple to use. Now, we can get away with something smaller like that, almost shaped like a toenail gouge. Very small, it's only about a 1/4 inch wide with a round nose. I have it sharpened up fairly well too. The only thing we have to remember is we need to make sure that everything stays tight, which I'm going to retighten real quick. Okay, and there we go. First of this video, hit myself in the head. I'm sure it won't be the last. But you can hear how that actually does a really nice job cutting. I have it sharpened fairly well, and that's the key with using these sharp tools. You're not going to get good results with dull tools. And you can hear right there there's a high spot. High spots a lot of times are going to cause, if you're not watching or if you try to take too deep of a cut with one pass, that's what's really going to cause maybe the lathe to stop on you. So we'll go back to the gouge real quick. And one thing about this, if it would hang up, I've found if you take fairly light pumps of this treadle, you can kind of just keep working it around almost like you were carving with a knife, which is another area that really makes this nice. So one reason I used that toenail scraper right there, I'm going to touch it up right here, is because I want to flip this around and work on the other end. So what I like to do is I turn a groove. I have a groove over here for my leather belting to ride in. So what's nice now is I can pop this loose. That loose, and here's what's going to happen. I was just checking there real quick to make sure everything lined up pretty well, and it seems like it does. So hold that in while I tap my wedge in place. Doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. Seems like it's still mounted fairly well. And what I can do now, I have it fairly round down on this side. I'm actually going to adjust the spring tension a little bit more just to give it a little bit more responsive action out of this treadle. Those pins came out there, so I'm just going to reset those for a second. There we go. Now you can see right there, it's too much tension at this point. I can back that off until I kind of fine tune this. Because I changed the diameter of that, I just have to change where that spring tensioner goes. You can see right there the spot that it's hanging up. Now what I can do, I could turn this out, but what I'm going to do right now, keeping my hands out from in front of that chisel, I'm just going to take my chisel and slice across and knock what that high spot is out of there. You've seen us do this on the powered lathes at school before, where we just take a hand plane maybe and skim off a spot that's just not quite working. Now, one thing that happened there, it started to work its way loose. That's the one thing you have to kind of pay attention to with this. On the lathe at school, Whereas if we're turning a bowl, we might have it locked in a faceplate, or if we're turning a spindle, a lot of times we're using a spur center. With this, I have just two dead centers, basically just two precision ground points that this is riding in. So if something works its way a little bit loose, there's really nothing in there to actually hold. On the flip side, since it's such low RPM, it's really not coming off of there at a real high rate of speed. It pretty much just drops, gets tossed over away from me. Right there, I have that end perfectly round. So what I actually do with this skew chisel, I actually just start working the tip in, maybe a 1/4 inch at a time. Trying to keep in mind that at every return stroke, I'm trying to reduce the amount of pressure, if not completely lift it off the piece of wood that I'm working with. And you can hear right there where it sneaks up and it finally is round. There is no chattering noise. It smooths out, the sound does. Now, when I've had this in school, a lot of times the question goes to, what's the limitations? What's the same? What's different? Well, the limitations really are a lot of times similar to a regular lathe. What's the swing? And by that we mean from the center point here, how far, what's the largest thing we can actually put on here? There are people that turn bowls on these. I've spun larger items on this. It is a little bit different. This isn't the heaviest thing, so it does jump around a little bit. I've never actually completed a bowl on this, to be honest. Other things though, this is great for spindle work. It turns things you can turn it at a fairly rapid rate. One neat thing is you can turn cups on this that have handles, because you can stop at the handle and keep cutting. The only thing you have to remember is every couple passes you actually have to flip it around and cut the other way, otherwise you'll end up with an oval because you're stopping your cut part way around that object, which we can't do on a power lathe because obviously it's always spinning in one direction. Usually once it's round, upwards of 500, if it's a spindle, possibly close to 2,000 RPMs in the shop. The one big thing you have to remember though is you are working with green wood here. And I know a lot of times with carving class we bring in firewood or burls even, making bowls in the lathe out of green wood. And we're careful how we pack them, you know, using the wet chips to kind of fill the bowl to control the moisture. A lot of times we wrap them in plastic bags, making sure we flip them inside out each day. Which, if you do have me for class, if you had been working on a bowl, periodically I go up to the school outside and check to make sure that there's no mold forming in those bowls, so we're okay with that. But other than that, you know, the basic cuts that we've learned in school, you know, how to cut a bead even, it's pretty much the same. You know, I can take this skew chisel, it's at a nice angle, and I can come in make sure my belt doesn't jump off this, because it's about to. And just slide that over. There we go. Right there, I try to take a little bit heavier cut, and this is fairly lightweight, so it actually moved the lathe a little bit. I'm going to use the opposite skew because they do work nice in situations like this where I'm trying to get tight to something. The other thing that helps with this too is that apple wood is super nice to work with. You see me have a little bit of it in at the shop. We cut some boards on it on the bandsaw earlier this year. It's a very tight grain. It hand planes. It works with hand tools, period, very nicely. And with powered tools in our shop, it works very nicely. So that's one of the really nice things about it. And like I said in class to you already this year, you know, one of the real reasons apple isn't super common is apple trees produce a useful fruit, so we want to try to keep them as much as we can. The main reason I cut these two down was they were fairly close to my house and they started to rot down through the center of the main trunk. So I have some boards now. Rather than burn it all, I have some boards, and obviously I have some turning stock for the Springpole Lathe, as well as some spoon carving materials, which some of you used earlier this year when we did our wooden spoon unit. So, what I have there is I have a basic bead with a cove on either side of it. In a second I'm going to grab the camera to kind of show you this. Now, other things we can make, I told you last week, the carving mallets. I think we have made one or two of those on this. I had this out at Logs to Lumber the other year, and a couple former students, and I think a couple of you guys were actually using it. This was a set of plans from the Woodwright shop. I think I gave all my classes a video or two from that TV show to watch this week because there's some great information on that. In a second I am going to grab the camera so we can see exactly kind of what I was doing here. And again, this wasn't exactly for any project. This was just a piece of scrap branch wood I took a saw to and cut a little piece off so you could see it. But other than that, I mean, I stayed fairly true to the plans that were in there. The only main difference I had was my treadle down here. In the plans, it was just a board, and what I found was that board really slid around a lot on me, and I didn't care for that. So I built an actual treadle, something that went the whole way across in case I was working, had a longer piece and needed to work the whole way over here. And the other thing is, my tool rest is closer to what you'd see on a powered lathe, like like something we have in the shop. A lot of times with these, it's just a piece of wood kind of clamped on there. But I decided to go with an actual, more traditional, standard, like a powered lathe design for my tool rest. So real quick, I'm going to bring the camera over. We're going to look at how that tailstock is connected. And you can see, again, all it is, it's a mortise and tenon like we talked about last week, but it's at an angle. So the base, almost like a T, sits in the bed, and then that nice red oak wedge drives through there in an angled hole. And what we have here, I have a pin to keep it from popping the whole way out. So what we have here, you know, we started with something like this, just rough, some of that softer underlayer of the bark's still there. I have my 2 coves that I cut with that little fingernail gouge, and then I have this bead here. So really, the designs I'm pulling from when I am doing my turning are no different really than anything else I might do on the powered lathe. Mostly it's just the speed at which it takes me. You can see there's the other kind of cove or groove I cut so that the belt had a place to ride in. And that fingernail gouge I'm talking about, it's not really a gouge, it's more like a curved scraper, but it is very, very small. It's only about a 1/4 inch square stock. And I sharpened and polished that, so it actually did a very nice job on this. Another thing, in case we didn't see earlier, you know, that hewing hatch I told you about, you can see from the top, let me see if I can get a good angle, that this side of the blade is much steeper, and this side's fairly flat. That's so you can get in nice and tight to whatever you're trying to hew and square up usually. Alright, so that's it. That's all for this week. Next week, my plan is, since we missed my annual end of March International Hand Plane Appreciation Day, I will be bringing to you the first ever internet version of that. So I'm going to set up my bench in the shop here with all my hand planes that I can dig out of some of the boxes that I have them stored in. We're going to have a little bit of a talk about different kinds of hand planes. A few of you already of this year have asked me which hand planes to kind of look for, what to buy. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, a little bit on how to set them up maybe, more than we've talked in shop. So it should be a good time. I know that's always your favorite class of the year. So, have a great day. Take care. Hope we're back in class pretty soon.